Okay, so before we move on to the debt and interest setup, just want to remind you that I am continuing to save versions of this file as I go along so that at any point, if you get stuck, you can always download a step and work from that. And also, especially if you get stuck somewhere where you see that you've done something that wasn't necessarily correct, or if you're in doubt about whether the steps that you've done are correct. Um, Before I move on to debt and interest, I want to talk to you a bit about the trade-off between simplicity and functionality, or I would also go on and say auditability and functionality. Um, Whenever you add in more functionality to a financial model, the ability to audit those formulas becomes a bit harder. Now, that trade-off is something that's a bit of a judgment call, and I'm going to try to illustrate that with an example in this capex and DNA schedule. So you've seen how I populated the capex and DNA schedule, and you've also seen me earlier talk about writing formulas in a way such that if you write the formula once, you should be able to copy, write, copy down, and everything should happen automatically. And so one of the ideas that you want to now start thinking about is that, well, could you modify this formula such that if you copied it right, copied it down, it would work? And the answer obviously is yes. I mean, Excel is a pretty powerful tool, and one of the statements you will end up using a lot is the if statement. The if statement is the easiest logical function. It literally tells you if something is a certain way, then do X, and if it's not, then do Y. A lot of modelers, intermediate modelers, tend to overuse the if statement. They just tend to stick an if statement into everything. There are some dangers associated with that I'm not going to get into in a whole lot of detail in this iteration, but I intend to talk about what it means to overdo the if formula. For now, let's talk a bit. Let's look at the example, because this is meant to be a beginner's course. So I just want to give you an example. Now, if you wanted to rewrite this formula such that copying it below would not result in numbers getting populated, you will want to tie the if statement to the year of capex with the year in which the forecast is happening. And so simply, if you were to take a view that said if the year that didn't happen correctly. If the year in which you want this capex to happen is greater than or equal to the year in which the capex is happening, then you can take the view of replicating the formula that we had written earlier. And if not, then we want nothing to appear or zero to appear. And if you want nothing to appear, you can just do these two inverted commas, and that's one way of nothing for nothing to appear. Or you can just choose zero. Let's go with inverted commas for now. Here I haven't anchored my if statement correctly. I want to anchor it such that if I copy this formula down, I don't want cell I-24 to come down, which means that I want to put the $ on the row. But when I copy this formula to the right, I do want my F25 to actually, no, I don't want F25 to move. So I'm going to put a dollar before the column F, and this I understand this. The whole process of exactly where to put the $ can sometimes become a bit confusing. But the good thing is that if you ever get stuck, you can always write a formula, copy it right, copy it down, and then see if it's working correctly. And if it's working correctly, then you've done it right. And if it's not, then you need to think about changing where you want to put the anchors. And so now this is a fairly well automated formula where, I mean, literally, this one formula can populate everything here, right? And that's powerful. But at the same time, while it's powerful, it's creating some complexity, because let's say you are working with a team that's not that comfortable with if statements. Is this really adding sufficient value? And the answer is, as with all things, it depends. It depends how literate your team is in auditing formulas or in auditing Excel. Just remember one thing, that as you learn Excel, you'll be tempted to automate and you'll be tempted to write cool formulas. Always remember, complexity is the enemy of execution. Excel is a useful communication tool that builds alignment, that gets people aligned to take next steps in order for actions to happen, for economic activity to happen, for decisions to get made. Getting stuck in Excel for the sake of Excel, or modeling for the sake of modeling, or analysis for the sake of analysis, that's dangerous. My view is, for a simple model like this, you don't need this functionality, but you do. But I mean, it's still an example that is worth showing. I did a couple of things, going back to keyboard shortcuts that I just that I just want to highlight, emphasize a bit more strongly. Getting in and out of the formula. So the F2 key is going to be a pretty important friend of yours. And I want to now, we're back to the original basic formula. I want to help you write this formula, but I want to just be a bit more deliberate about when I am pressing F2 and how to get in and out of the formula. This is something that's not obvious to a lot of Excel users. So when you want to get into a formula, you press F2. The back arrow key will let you get to the point where you want to insert a certain logical operator, in this case, the if statement. And if I open the square bracket, the if formula has gotten started. And now I want to select cell I-24. At this stage, if I just press the up arrow key, it's not going to get out of this formula. For me to do that, I need to press F2 again, and that will help me get to the cursor. So F2 is, think of it like a toggle between moving your cursor within the formula or selecting another cell. So in this case, now I have toggled out of the formula bar and I've selected cell I-24, and I want to say if cell I-24 is greater than or equal to, at this stage, greater than or equal to, at this point, if I hit the left arrow key, I will still be able to toggle. But if I were to press F2, I'm going to get back to toggling within the formula, right? So what I want to do is, of course, press the comma here in order to fulfill my logical operator, and press the right arrow key because I had already toggled back to be within the formula. And again, if this toggle in language is getting a bit complicated, just remember, if you press F2 a bunch of times, it allows you to get in and out of the formula that you're auditing, so that you always continue to use the keyboard and never use the mouse. That is really, really important. So again, if I now I haven't anchored these cells correctly. If I want to anchor them, I'd press F2, the back arrow key, and again, more anchoring tests for you. It's I want to make sure cell F25 does not move to the right, and I want to make sure that cell I-24 moves to the right but does not move down. And so I'm going to anchor the column of one and the row of the other. And this allows me to write this formula. So I'm just going to save this as step 4, just so you have it. Just again, more keyboard shortcuts. Alt F8 gets you to the save screen. The number 1 will get you to the folder where you want to save these, and yeah. Okay, so with that, let's move to debt and interest, and we're going to have some more repetition with anchoring and basic formulas. It's intentional, this whole exercise of getting you to anchor and re-anchor and punch in the keyboard. This is going to seem annoying, it's going to seem very basic, but I will take you back to this book, The Art of Learning, where the author mastered 2 very diverse skills, chess and I believe it was judo or taekwondo, but one involved the brain and one was a pretty physical exercise. And his whole view in Art of Learning is that to go fast, you have to first start slow. So the more you understand these basics, the more you understand how to use the keyboard effectively, how to get schedules made quickly, how to get a model made quickly, the better you will be at financial modeling. Let's now populate the debt and interest. You're going to notice that in each step, I have written in words what formula you want to use, and don't get too lost in the formula. Just like in this case, we're saying that every year for secured debt we're paying off 2 million rupees. I mean, the way we are calculating that is, there's a couple of ways of doing it. You could insert another row, and you could put in the annual payment, or you could just calculate the annual payment within the formula. And I'm going to do it by inserting a row, because I want to teach you how to insert a row. So to insert a row in a spreadsheet, you select a row where you want something inserted, hit Shift spacebar, and then Control Shift and the plus arrow key. So here you want to say, okay, annual payment for secured debt, and actually let's enter another, and then we want to say annual payment for unsecured debt. And this is literally just the face value divided by the term, right? And since this is a calculation, we're going to do Alt HFC, and term is not applicable, and yeah. So this in this case, the face value is not the right term to use. So I take that back. Actually, I'm going to do it slightly differently. Now, let's say if we were actually modeling this out and we're not happy with where we've arrived at, because we can see that the annual payment doesn't quite fit in this the classification of face value. In that case, I would actually delete these rows, which you can do by selecting a row again, Shift spacebar, the control and minus sign, and I'd put in maybe like annual payment here. And I would just calculate that annual payment as follows. And now, in order to forecast my debt, I would take the previous year's balance and subtract from it the annual payment. And again, I would want to anchor it such that the column is anchored, but not the row, such that when I copy right and I copy down, everything gets copied correctly, and Alt HAC helps me center these formulas. And now to calculate interest expense, I'm going to take the existing balance and multiply it by my interest rate, which for my secure debt is fixed and not changing. So I can actually just anchor the cell I-10 completely, and copy this to the right. In my unsecured debt, I've got a floating interest rate, which means it's tied to some other benchmark like KIBOR, which is Karachi Interbank overnight borrowing rate, and then LIBOR is similar, but where instead of K is for Karachi, L is for LIBOR. But any time you see something called XIBOR, it's just an interbank borrowing rate, which is a good which is generally used as a benchmark in floating debt instruments. So we will take the existing balance again. Only keyboard shortcut. So equals to up arrow key. Select the unsecured debt. Shift and 8 if you're on a keyboard, or just the multiplication sign if you're on a regular keyboard. Open square bracket, or open bracket, 1 plus the up arrow key, and select the floating interest rate and close bracket and copy to the right. And again, Alt H A C. And when you copy this, when you just sum the total interest expense, I clearly did something wrong over here. Right, instead of yeah, I've assigned it too big of an interest rate. I've made it 113%. Instead, what I wanted to do was calculate the spread, which is right here. And now that is going to work.